am from a small town. I come from the town of Hopeton, Oklahoma. Is there anyone in the room who can find Hopeton on a map? Wait, who are you? You know where Hopeton is? And you looked it up. That counts because you're the only one in the room. I give you full credit for that. It's very near Alva. For those of you that know western Oklahoma, I'm just south of Alva. Alva is my hometown. And it really is a small town. And I'm going to talk about what small town entrepreneurs have to teach all of us about social media and about business in general. Because the businesses that survive in the future are going to be the ones who act like small town businesses. So, tweet it out, definitely. I have been on Twitter since 2006, October 2006. I did my first blog in 2003. I have been around for a while in social media. And when I go to big events, people used to ask me, how did you ever get involved in social things from such a small town? Small towns are very social, and what's more, we have electricity and computers and everything, so it all works out. So I'm working on this concept of small town entrepreneurs along with Barry Moltz. Barry is not a small town entrepreneur. Barry Moltz is from Chicago. But he is also a member of the Entrepreneurship Hall of Fame. He has run 4 businesses, has done a lot with entrepreneurship. And I bring the small town perspective. This is downtown Hopeton, Oklahoma. That's our grain elevator. There's actually only 2. We have 2 grain elevators. For those of you that are used to seeing the long row of grain elevators, we have 2. So we have different perspectives. But because Barry speaks a lot in small towns, he also gets the small town idea. And of course, because I'm an entrepreneur all my life, started my first business in junior high school, then I think that I have some entrepreneurial credibility as well, although I've never been pushed out of my own business by my own partners, which Barry has had happen. So I think that I'm a small head on the entrepreneur. I really do run a liquor store in Alva, Oklahoma, and a cattle ranch in Woods County. I do consulting with small town governments. That's a holdover from when I used to be a small town city manager, and I learned everything I could about small town city management and carried that forward with me, and now that's one of my consulting jobs that I do. And I also do social media marketing specifically for tourism. So I work within a niche in the social media world. But I have a strong feeling that small towns have a lot to offer in the world of entrepreneurship. And that led us to the idea that small towns are a center of commerce in a way that most people do not realize. Small towns are the centers of some big businesses. You've probably all heard of Viking Range. Did you know they come out of a small town? You knew. See, there you go. You've got one. Do you have one?
My mom's the sales rep for them.
Your mom, see? You had the inside information, and so you knew that they come from that small town. But that center of commerce concept is particularly relevant today, but in order to understand that, we have to go back in time a little bit. We have to go back in the way back to remember when. Do you remember how the economy was before 2008, when everything changed? Do you remember when we had a bull market, when everything went up? The stock market always went up. The value of your portfolio always went up. Your salary was always going up. The value of your home always went up. We had commercials on TV that said you need to mortgage your house with a second mortgage to cash out some equity so that you can jump on a hot stock or join a country club. Do you remember that commercial? That's the kind of economy that we used to have until everything changed. When the economy came crashing down, starting around in 2008, that was a major shift for the country. At the same time that was going on, we were seeing a major shift in technology that was enabling us to live and work and communicate in ways that we had not been able to before. And that happened to be happening at about the same time. So those two things coming together, society as a whole, we kind of made a lateral shift. We moved off to one side, and we had more of a focus on local. We became much more concerned about what was going on in our neighborhood, with our neighbors, our businesses. So that was a completely different way for society to be working than it had been before. The State of the Union address from the President this year laid out very clearly what the economic challenge for the U.S. is. And he focused on how we need smarter and more competitive companies, how we need better trained and more competitive and innovative workers. All of these are things that rural areas have been thinking about for a long time. In fact, Bill Bishop, who is the editor of the Daily Yonder, it's a great little online site that talks about rural issues, he summed up that entire speech by saying, we're all rural now. Those are small town issues. We've been doing this for literally the last 100 years. So it was not news to us for the economy to be changing. We dealt with the economy, that's Alva, by the way, downtown Alva, Oklahoma. Well, this is also like a tour guide, see, we're going to get you out to the small towns. So rural areas, small towns, we had dealt with the fact that the population shifted from rural to urban, so we lost a big population shift. We also had our economy shift on us so that we were no longer completely based on agriculture, but a lot of small towns gained a small manufacturing base. Do you remember when there used to be a lot of small town manufacturing? Then what happened is that shifted and most of that went overseas, and so that's been lost. So this is not the first crisis for small towns, and in fact it's definitely not the first crisis for Western Oklahoma, because we went through the Dust Bowl way out in Western Oklahoma. And that era buried some very long-held ideals. We had long thought things like the soil can never be exhausted. That was honestly printed from the farming instructions at the time. And then anybody can make money in a boom. Some of these are still around, aren't they? Some of these ideas are still around. Well, rural areas, we kind of learned our lessons from some of those things, and we realized every resource has limits. And what comes after every boom? The bust. You only have to go through that cycle about once before you realize it'll be back. And when the next boom comes, then you're thinking, all right, there's going to be a bust. We need to prepare now. And that's the truth. And we understand that in Oklahoma in a way that many big cities will never understand, because they don't have that same kind of cyclical economy that we deal with here. So we understand it differently. And here is why anybody in a big city would care what's going on in small towns. We are all building small communities online. We are all dealing with small community issues, and so where is the proper learning lab to go learn about small communities? Small towns, where we are in the middle of small communities. So what works well in small towns can now work well for anyone who's dealing with small community issues online. So we'll start off and we'll talk about the economy and how the economy has changed and what lessons we can draw from small towns dealing around the economy. So the first thing is just to remind you of really how significant the economic change was. In 2008, the stock market fell about 50% to 6,500. And that's about half of where it is now, but that was a huge drop. The Wilshire 5000 is still 14% off of its high. So you can tell that definitely there were major changes in the economy. And the result of that is that lending became very tight as well. And I mean, have you walked into a bank and tried to borrow anything more than a pen? You don't get it, Mandy says, and she's right. The lending is very tight right now. Capital is very tight. The value of our homes has been really hit hard, and the value of businesses was hit hard as well. So that lack of consumer spending is also a major problem, because 70% of our economy is consumer spending. So that tight lending, let's talk about a small town that went through a problem with lending. This is Cornelia, Georgia, and it is Community Bank and Trust. What a great name, Community Bank and Trust. In 2006, this bank was very much a small town sort of bank. They had small town lending practices, which meant every time that you went in to get a loan officer would come out and inspect your collateral. They would look at your real estate, check your home, make sure it was worth everything that you said. They would go over all your paperwork with a fine-tooth comb. But starting in 2006, the fact that they were just 70 miles from Atlanta caught up with them. And buyers from Atlanta started coming out and buying second homes around the lake near Cornelia. Suddenly there was a real estate boom. Anybody could make money in the boom. And so houses were changing hands very quickly. People were making a lot of money. So since it's so easy to make money in real estate, they loosened up their lending practices. Suddenly everybody could get a loan. And if you were in there for a real estate loan, they were happy to give it to you. You know where the story ends, don't you? In 2010, the feds closed them down. Talk about a major blow to a small community's view of itself. This is a town of about 4,000 people. They really still think of themselves as a small town. So this was a major blow to their view of who they are. They got away from the original small town way of doing things, that sense of community. And so it's so ironic that the name of the business is Community Bank and Trust. Yeah. So that's our first lesson. We're going to talk about a couple of lessons from the economy. First is you do have to plan for zero. You have to be prepared for the kinds of ups and downs that go on in business. You have to take that long-term perspective because things will go wrong. There will be months with no income. It will happen. You will have projects go south. You're nodding because apparently you've done this, yes? This is the zero table. They've been through the zero economy. I tell you what, let's look at an example. Let's look, this picture right here on the right, that is a view out my back window in Hopeton, Oklahoma. That's the wheat field behind my house. Those are my neighbors, the Percivals, harvesting wheat last June. Let's look at their last 5 years of wheat farming. Any of you that are wheat farmers in the room know how bad this is going to be. 5 years ago was a great year. Yields were very high and the price was stable. That was a good year. There were a couple of average years in the middle, and then there was the year that it rained. And it rained, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained right through harvest, and they plowed it under. That's a zero for the entire year, people. They lost it all. So that's a zero. The next year, which is this last year in June, it started raining in harvest again. And it rained, and it rained, and they finally got into the field very late. There were a lot of weeds. The conditions weren't good. There were areas they could not harvest and they were still going to lose. They saved about a quarter of their income. Last year was a zero. This year was a quarter of their usual annual income. The only way to survive that kind of wild swing in income is to seriously take the long term and to plan for those years when it will be zero. An example of a large national corporation that takes a long-term perspective is Vanguard Investments. John C. Bogle is the man who really shaped how Vanguard Investment works. You're a Vanguard investor, aren't you? They have stay the course. That's their thing, stay the course. Choose the right asset mix, invest at cost, stick with the plan, and look long-term. That's the plan. And Vanguard has stuck with that, and they beat 75% of their competition, which is pretty impressive in the mutual fund industry. But that's that long-term perspective. It works in national and big corporations as well as wheat farmers. The second lesson is to spend your brains before your money, because too much money really can make you stupid, right? Mandy's wishing that she could be a blithering idiot. I know she is. Well, then we'll talk. When I get to the too much money, then we'll talk. Well, I tell you, I just came back from South by Southwest, and I saw a lot of spending for status. People that were paying for big parties, people that were driving flashy cars around that they had rented. There was a lot of spending for status going on at South by Southwest. And you see a lot of that around in companies that are up against you. You're smarter than that. You are going to be like the small town people, and you're going to think about the fact that your status is not number one. Your survival is number one. There's also the fact of ignoring cycles. Every business goes through some very natural cycles. There's that beginning phase where you're really excited and you're having a good time. It's thrilling and you're really... Mandy's laughing because she's not in that stage anymore.
Maybe I should have sat right here.
You're a horrible distraction. I'm going to move in a minute. I go talk to somebody else. So really, there's that beginning stage. You're excited. It's great fun. You're having a good time with the business. You know it's going to do well. What comes next? That's that middle stage with the shattered innocence. That's where Mandy is. She's in the shattered innocence stage. Things happen. You realize it is not near as much fun as what I thought it was going to be. And that's the way business works. But in that stage, you have to continue plugging along. In that case, it's a matter of staying power. Can you keep the business going? Do you have the staying power to make it work? And then finally, we come to the ending cycles. And the ending cycle may be one of these things where you have no choice about it. You just went broke, and so you're done. Or it may be one of those things that you have built something with great and lasting value, and so you have the opportunity to maybe sell out. So let's look at an example of a business that took a nice long-term perspective, built great value, and was really frugal about themselves. This is Jack, what's Jack's last name? The man that started Quill Office Supply. He started it in the back of his father's chicken store. I love that. Started in the back of the chicken store in the 1950s. And for 42 years, they took the long-term perspective and paid attention to their business cycles, and they built a business. 42 years. Sold out to Staples Office Supply for $640 million. Started in the back of his dad's chicken store and sold out for $640 million. It only, did you call it? Did you say it?
I said amen.
I am with you. That's fine. You are fully welcome to shout out during the presentation. I welcome any activity after lunch. I really do. So $640 million. You know, the bad news was, though, that he got to take that in Staples stock. And he had to hold it for 90 days. SEC rules say 90 days. So he spent 90 long, agonizing days staring at the stock market. And he sold out finally on day 91 at $1 billion. So if you think long term, if you work like a dog for 42 years and you're lucky, good things can happen. But I'm telling you, he didn't build that by spending for status, did he? You didn't see him throwing flashy parties. You never saw a race car sponsored by Quill Office Supply. Although that would have been cool. But that's the kind of business story that it takes to succeed. It's that small town ethic. So let's look at the third lesson from the economy, which is something that I think a lot of us do, which is we use multiple lines of income to reduce our risk. And that's definitely a farming kind of thing. The farmers, the Percivals that I just told you about, that 5-year time period, the only reason they can survive that is because wheat is not their only product. They also do cattle, so that they can hopefully, average those two out. I do the same thing. I run a liquor store. The liquor store business is a good business. It's usually pretty stable. If times are bad, people need a drink. If times are good, people want to celebrate. The liquor business is usually pretty good. The cattle business, on the other hand, it depends what's going on, and we are completely dependent there on the commodity price of beef. Now, beef is up. We're happy with that. I noticed you didn't serve beef during today's meal when you knew you had a cattle rancher coming. That's just, that's just an expected thing. But
What's for dinner?
Beef, it's what's for dinner. All right. So, we use that then to moderate the risk of the beef cattle market, is we have that stable liquor store business to help moderate the risk. So that's kind of a small town way of doing things. But lots of entrepreneurs grow multiple businesses. I'm sure that, in fact, many of you have more than one line of income within your business. You don't just rely on one particular thing. You may have, for a musician, there might be, besides performances, there would be recordings and lessons and private sessions and all sorts of different lines of income within the same company. And you can do the same thing. You want to find more than one line of income so that if there's a problem with one line of income, you're not out of business. So, of course, farmers are the originals at this. In western Oklahoma, we'll grow a wheat crop, and then we'll run cattle across that. We'll graze the wheat pasture in the winter, and then we'll use the wind above that ground to draw water out of the ground. So that's 4 things out of one section of ground, and we do that consistently. And I think that influences why small town businesses in our area tend to have multiple lines of income and multiple businesses. Bill Birch here is a really great example of this. He's out of Iowa. He's in Appanoose County, Iowa. It is the 97th of 99 counties in terms of income. So they're the 97th poorest county in the entire state of Iowa. Bill has built for himself 18 businesses, 150 employees. Everything from an appliance store to a nursing home. Everything. They have a whole broad base of businesses, including one business that does nothing except provide accounting and HR support for all the other businesses. So he's definitely gotten the idea that diversifying and spreading out those lines of income mean that you can cut down on the risk. So that takes entirely through the economy. So let's talk about technology, and I'm going to move away from Mandy, who keeps making faces at me. That's your job. All right, so technology changed. This is the way we would all like to work, isn't it? Technology makes it possible. I want a cushion, though. That looks really uncomfortable. This is as significant a change to me as what rural electric was to my parents and grandparents. Rural electrification started out in the 1930s. These posters are from the 1937 rollout. It took decades to get that job done. I have family members in northwest Oklahoma that were using kerosene lanterns up into the 1960s before rural electric reached them. Because of the sparse population out there, it took a long time before rural electric hit every household. But it was incredibly significant because it also meant for the first time since electricity came around and electrified businesses, for the first time you could locate a business out in a small town and actually be based away from the big city as long as you could get on the electrical grid. That was the only trick, was get on the electrical grid. So it's a huge and significant change, and we're seeing that kind of change with technology today. And so you can work anywhere and any when. Leah Woodward is the originator of this great phrase about location-independent professionals. I bet a whole bunch of you could pack up your work into a nice little briefcase and take it wherever you wanted to go. Wherever you wanted to go. Chris Brogan calls it anywhere and any when. The telephone solves the problem of anywhere. We don't have to be in the same room to talk. But online technology solves the problem of any when. I don't have to be up at the same time you do. I can check my messages whenever. And I know that right now work is piling up on my iPad waiting for me to be done with any when. So that's the way it goes around. Here's a few examples of people that really do this well. Eliza Sherman is a terrific example. She's based in Tok, Alaska. It's a population of about 1,000 people. About 1,000 people all spread out in this little tiny town. She's living there. Her husband is a wildlife biologist, and so she has been transferred along with him from Montana to Anchorage to Tok, Alaska. It gets down to 60 below in Alaska, and it'll stay there for a month. I wouldn't leave the house. I'm not sure Eliza does. But at 60 below, she's still able to do her work from wherever she is, and it still works for her. And I think it can work for any of us. Scott Jordan is a terrific example of a big city company that moved. Scott eVest, they make travel clothing. Have you heard of the eVest travel vests? You have. They moved that entire corporation from Chicago to Idaho because they wanted to ski more. So they moved completely. They abandoned Chicago. They moved to Sun Valley, Idaho, and they're having a great time. The whole family's having a good time there. They left the shipping and the fulfillment stuff in Chicago, and then they're based, and all the intelligence work is done where they are, in Sun Valley, Idaho, where they're having a good time. Another example is rural America. There's a number of companies that do this. I love this idea. It's called rural sourcing. Big Chicago company needs an IT contract. They want to outsource it. They can, if they try to outsource it to another company within Chicago, it's going to be however many dollars. But if they outsource it offshore, they can save quite a bit of money. But did you know that if you outsource that to, say, Sapulpa, you could save between 25 and 40% off what it would cost to have it done in Chicago? And there's smart people everywhere. I've been to Sapulpa. There's smart people in Sapulpa. So that kind of rural... There are. What? Name them. Linda Broadus. I'll send her to your house. All right. Man, I tell you, the small town bias is real. And I tell you what, I was at South by Southwest. I'm going to pick on you now. I was at South by Southwest. Me and a superstar woman, Liz Strauss, were sitting down at our friend's house in Round Rock, Texas. And so Liz tweets, "I'm in Round Rock." And a big city guy, he tweets back, "Do they have Twitter there?" They have Dell's corporate headquarters, so figure it out. But that kind of theory about what small towns are really like, very prevalent, very prevalent. And I'm not really picking on you in particular, a little bit maybe, but the rural sourcing really does work. There are very smart people that are located anywhere they can get on the grid technology-wise, and you can move a technology company to anywhere that it works for you. So lesson 5 then is to treat your customers like a community. This is very much a small town thing. Any one of your customers can now talk to any other one of your customers. I can promise you I have lived with this with my liquor store for years. One bad customer service story can go straight to the coffee shop, which is the center of all local news, and that can be all around town within hours. It does not take long. Now what do? We go online and we tweet about it. I cannot believe how they treated me. You know, United breaks your guitar, and so of course you make a video about it. I mean, we all handle our customer service issues online now. But that is just like a small town. You do have to treat everyone well. Customer service becomes your only sustainable competitive advantage when it's just like a small town. It is your only sustainable competitive advantage when you're in a small town environment. So who does that well? This is what Scott gets for not coming to the conference today, is we're going to pick on him because he's not here. United Linen, Scott Townsend, world-class experimenter in social media. He's been messing around with it for a long time, and he's figured out a lot of things. They take customer service very seriously. They did one of the best videos in terms of customer service I have ever seen, and I saw it in 2007. It's brilliant. They took one of their people, they stood them up in front of the automatic paper towel dispenser and showed how to load the paper towels in the automatic paper towel dispenser. If you have tried to load one of these new paper towel dispensers, you're rolling your eyes. You've done it. It's horrid. I mean, there's like, I watched the video and went, it's that complicated now? Okay, you roll it under these rollers, over this here. Be sure to put this tensioner right here on the paper. Okay, so, I mean, it's a complex procedure. They put that on video. It's a 2-minute video. Do you know how many customers that made happy? How many phone calls were prevented because somebody could watch the video and go, oh, the tensioner, that's what I'm messing up. Small companies get it. Small town companies get it. Do you know that the manufacturer of the paper towel dispenser made them take it down? They had to pull the video because the manufacturer didn't like it. Did the manufacturer replace it with a similar video? Of course not. Small town companies get it. Big city companies don't automatically get it just because they're from the big city. Sometimes small town people are smart. I just want to make sure you all understand that. And now I'm really picking on you, man. You're in for it. Okay, Comcast is a big city example. They really did an amazing thing with customer service at Comcast. Any Comcast customers in the room? Is Comcast in this area? No. Okay, so usually, you know, where we just did this in South by Southwest, we had a whole bunch of Comcast people in the room, and, you know, we had the outcry of yay and boo at the same time. So there's, you know, mixed reviews. But their customer service really changed completely when Frank Eliason moved in and took over and started Comcast Cares as a Twitter account, and they started paying attention to what their customers were saying. When he started that job the very first week, he had to deal with, you know, one of these haters that sits around and creates websites and logos and, you know, really obsesses over the company. The first thing he had to deal with said, Comcast must die. How'd you like that on your first week of the job? That's friendly. So having survived that, they've gone on and created a really outstanding company, and they do a really great job of using customer service. Now we get to the point of society, and normally I would move back over there, but Mandy would make faces at me again, so I'm going to stay right here. But society really is changing. We have seen this. You remember the economy was coming like this, technology was coming up, society went off to the side. We made a big shift towards paying attention to what was small and what is local. We all are a lot more interested in what is going on with our neighbors now than we are with what's going on in the national economy. This is an entire movement. This actually came from Pioneer Telephone Cooperative, which is in my corner of the state. They provide, my grandmother, honestly, was a telephone operator for these people, and they now do my cell phone contract, as well as my DSL for my house. So it's a great little cooperative that has survived, but they are definitely proud of being local. And that's just one example. If you look at the food movement, the local food movement, the National Restaurant Association did their survey of chefs for the year to find out the trends for this coming year. They have 20 top trends for this year. 5 of them are local food. 5 different local food trends. Local produce, local meats, local booze, which I thought was interesting. But also, you know, chefs that are creating their own gardens. Local is taking over every aspect of our society. It is that important. So now is the time to be proud of being a small business. Be proud of being small. Flaunt your small size. I just saw another article. It was, now it's been like 3 weeks ago, but I think it was in the New York Times. How to act like a big business. You know, pretend like you're bigger than you are using these tools. No! Be the size you are. Being a small business is an advantage. It absolutely is. And one of the reasons it is because you have that ability to build community. You have that ability. You do not have to stand on the balcony and broadcast to your adoring fans. You can come down and talk to people in the crowd. one-on-one. You can build community that way. Big companies do not have that luxury, and you do, so work with it. Here's a company that has known how to be small, and they have stuck with it for years. W.L. Gore and Associates started out as one guy in his basement working with chemicals. Every one of you in this room owns a piece of Gore-Tex fabric. You do. Gore-Tex fabric is everywhere, and it's in everything. But that's not the only thing they do. They also do a lot of work with chemicals and industrial applications. So they're a fascinating company, and they have grown to 8,000 associates. They still have a rule. Every work team has to be 150 or smaller. No team can get bigger than that. And if it gets bigger than that, they break it off and move it to a new building. Split it up. Because after 150, you can't know everyone anymore. So they're sticking with that rule even up to the point that there are 8,000 people. They're still working in these small groups where you can still know everyone. And they're sticking with that even as technology is changing the way that we communicate. They're adapting to it, but they're still sticking with knowing that small works better. The final lesson, you'll be glad to know, the final lesson is to be local. Connect with your community. You come from somewhere. I think Tulsa does a great job with this. Tulsa has a community. Tulsa has a culture. Tulsa has a whole identity in a way that a lot of towns do not. Lori, isn't that right? I mean, Tulsa has its whole identity. Absolutely different than many small towns. Hold on to that identity. Be part of something. Hold on to your culture and heritage, because that helps you to build engagement. People want to know that you come from somewhere. An example of that is LL Bean. I just say the words LL Bean and you picture New England. You're dressed for the out of doors. You're climbing into a canoe. That's LL Bean. You know what it is. You are part of something too, so definitely connect with the culture that you come from and hold on to that even as you grow. And of course, I had to throw in a Tulsa example. I want you all to know I used the Tulsa example even when I was in Austin, so you guys got to cheer out there. Woo! All right, so Tulsa has a great program. Have you seen the Let's Do Business Tulsa program? You have. All right, some of you have. This is good. I love this project. It's a great idea. It's built on the idea that not every business knows about every other business in the greater metropolitan area. So when a business needs to buy something that has been coming from outside the area, that business is encouraged to look around and see if they can buy it in Tulsa at the same quality. And if they can, is the price the same or better than what they could get it somewhere else? And if so, buy it locally, if it's competitive. The website is full of stories of people that have done just that have saved money and have gotten everything that they needed, but they were able to do it by buying locally. It's a great example, and it applies a lot in online communities too. I can't tell you the number of times I went, oh, I didn't realize you also did SEO work. You do that? We all have that same kind of interaction where we don't realize everything that's right around us. And using a tool like this to build community makes a lot of sense. So that was all the lessons. Plan for zero. There will be times, just like the wheat farmer, when you will have a zero period of income. Spend your brain power before your dollars. Frugal is the new black. Multiply your lines of income, just like the farmers who have more than one product that they pull off of the same piece of ground. Work anywhere and anywhen. I don't care what they told you. You are not tied to a building in a big city. You can live and work wherever you want. Treat your customers like a community. It is your only sustainable competitive advantage when the world is like a small town. Be proud of being small. Right now, the world is very receptive to you being small and working your advantages, and be local. Where you are from, the culture and place you are from matters, and it matters a great deal. So that's the whole thing. What's the time? I have more. I have bonus at the end. I just need to know whether I've got time to take questions. 1:36. Man, I was talking fast. I didn't know I could talk that fast. So at this point, we have time for some questions. I'm going to hold the last 5 minutes. Somebody warned me at 5 minutes before my time is up, because I have some bonus lessons on how to build community like a small town business. So that's your warning. Do you have any questions, anything that you want to ask about that whole long, very quickly spoken thing?
Can you go back to the previous screen? There you go. Thank you so much.
I can.
Taking in progress. Yeah.
Note take. I love to hear that there's note taking in progress. That means I said something that was worth taking notes over. Unless you're like writing, this really sucks, and then I don't want to know about it.
We twittered that.
You tweeted that. You tweeted that. All right. Okay.
And your name specifically.
Yeah.
Sorry.
At Becky McCray, and then this is our hashtag.
Actually,
Okay.
I got you a new follower. He said, I'm now following her because of you. So.
See, and that's the way Twitter works. You just tweeted about what I was talking about. Somebody thought it was interesting, and so they have chosen to follow me. Poor them. They're going to find out that I tweet a lot. I tweet a lot. Some of you follow me, and you know I tweet a lot. Lori, do you not have any questions?
You know, I have a comment.
Okay. Do you want to come on up here? I'm going to embarrass you because that's my job. This is Lori Kane, Realtor Extraordinaire from the Tulsa area.
And we've known each other how long?
Oh my gosh, we have known each other since 1912. No, that's an exaggeration. Wait. 2003, 2004?
I don't remember.
A long time.
When Becky was talking about the whole buying local thing, one of the really strong trends in home buyers, whether they're moving to Tulsa, particularly ones that are moving from out of state to Tulsa, is they want to be close to grocery stores, they want to be close to parks, they want to walk, they want to take their bikes. They are all about recycling and sustainability, and so I farm in Midtown Tulsa, and that makes it really easy for me. I like to blog a lot about locally owned businesses because in Midtown we take a lot of pride in supporting our locally owned businesses. But it's just a really interesting trend. The buyers, the younger buyers, want to bike and walk to grocery stores and restaurants and libraries. And so, you know, they're now asking what the walkability score of a neighborhood is. So it's just interesting trends.
I think that's really interesting for two reasons. I mean, I just read an article where they said that very same thing, so it's nice to see that that is actually borne out by real experience in the real world by somebody who's actually doing it. The second thing is that walkability in neighborhoods. Neighborhoods are huge. You know, I talk about each small town having its own character. Every neighborhood is the same way. We all come from somewhere within even a larger scope, so neighborhoods are definitely growing in importance. So you don't have to just talk about, hey, I'm really proud to be from Tulsa. You can say, I'm very proud to be from Midtown.
Or South.
Or South Tulsa, or whatever your neighborhood is that you're proud of. Or Sapulpa, for God's sake. Or Hopeton, Oklahoma, I'm telling you. What other questions do you have? Yes?
What have been your observations in how small town or small community journalism is being done now versus, you know, maybe in the previous 30 years?
Small town journalism. Small town journalism is a very interesting question. As the big city newspapers really had major trouble in the past 3 years or so, small town newspapers really held on a lot better than bigger city newspapers. One, because they didn't have the competition, and number two, with a smaller population, that central repository of information, I think, made more sense in a smaller community. That being said, small town newspapers are being hit very hard right now. It has gotten even tighter and even tougher. I'm seeing, and so the big conglomerates of small papers, like community newspaper holdings, have not had it as easy as some of the independents, which actually did better. The future of news, I think, is really interesting. It would be an interesting exercise to sit down and build a small town news repository today. I'm going to take the word paper out of there because it probably isn't on paper, but if you treated everyone on Facebook as one of your reporters, what would it look like? It would be fascinating to do that as an exercise today. In terms of business reality, since I am very much a reality kind of person, business reality is it can definitely be done. My own local paper, the Alva Review Courier, alvareviewcourier.com, is experimenting with a lot of video. I'm very pleased to see how much video they are doing for a newspaper outlet. There was a rig explosion in our area, and when the locals came in with their photos that they took before the police got there, because it's a small town and so people just showed up and took pictures, you know. When they took those to the newspaper, they grabbed a video camera and interviewed them right then and said, what was it like? What did you see? That is a big addition to their website, and it draws a lot of traffic to their website, and consequently they sell a heck of a lot of advertising on their website, and that is a strong support for their existing business model. What other questions do you have? If I end early, Cheryl will kick me.
We had one from Twitter, somebody, actually from Scott. I wanted you to talk about what.
I had to laugh because, you know, I used him as an example and he should have been here.
He was following the tweets.
I'm sure he was.
He was asking about talking about locality of place versus local through social media and what the difference is.
Okay, this is one of my favorite things, is because how does being local have a meaning when you're in the room versus being local online? And I am located in Hopeton, Oklahoma, and being local in the room in Hopeton, Oklahoma is a relatively lonely prospect. There are 30 people in my town. The postmaster is expecting we will have 31 this summer. So there are more people in this room than live in my town. Now, the nearby town of Alva, about 5,000 people, we can have a tweet up in Alva now because we have more than one Twitter head in Alva now. But, so being local for me started out by being online local. I've developed places that I hung out online. Twitter was a great way for me to develop a sense of being local with my people without being in the same room with them. I didn't get in the same, I started on Twitter in 2006. I started my main blog early in 2006, but I never met those people face to face until 2008. But I built a great sense of community online.